Our first question comes from Arbaz Rabi. Assalamu alaikum. And the question is, Jahangir Saab, how can a Muslim logically prove life after death from the Quran to an atheist? If yes, if you can, how is it done?
I think we need to set the premise of this question first. And it should be that in principle, an atheist who I would expect to believe in the principles of science as they're known today shouldn't have any, reason to not accept the fact that there could be life after death as a matter of principle, because science today accepts that life came from death, meaning that existence came from non-existence. In the first place, they do recognize that our universe at one point wasn't there, and then it was here. It became existent, and so it doesn't show in any way that this couldn't happen once again. In principle, therefore, nobody can reject it, that it's logically impossible. Nobody can say that. It's logically possible. But going from there to proving that it actually does exist is quite a step. And one would be tempted to say that, well, one can only wait to die and find out, before, because in this life we can't actually go there and come back. Nobody has been known to have done that. And therefore there can't be any proof that we can take from having gone there and bringing it back to show that it actually exists. Nevertheless, what we should be looking for should be, therefore, is there anything coming from the other side? Is there anything coming from the spiritual world at all? Because if there is, then it would seem to suggest that there is something else apart from this physical life that we have here on earth. And luckily, we do find much coming from the other world. In particular, Allah Himself says that, don't you see that I brought you to life when you were dead, you were nothing? He said, I will bring you again to life after you have died. So He is declaring this as what He's going to do. Now, how do we believe this? It's because He says also that I know that you have many doubts, so therefore I'm going to tell you of things which are to come, which you will see will be fulfilled. And when they are fulfilled repeatedly, every time I tell you something will happen, it does come to pass, then you will know that the promise of your Lord is true. So this is the only the only way that we can know that there is something else out there. Now, I myself have posed this question to many atheists and told them that, look, this is what God said to this certain person, this is what happened. And it kept on happening again and again and again, exactly as had been predicted. And it's still happening today. There are so many people in the Ahmadiyya community to whom these things happen. And can you explain how these things are occurring? How can human beings who do not know, who have no knowledge of the future, how can they know these things? And I have never found an answer. Mostly it's we don't understand, we don't have an answer, or I have another meeting, I'll have to go now. So basically they evade the question as much as they can, because there is no answer except that this knowledge must be coming from somewhere else, a non-human source. So that is the only inferential proof that we have that there is something else after death.
And just building on it, we've got a later question which I think we'll take now, which comes from Ifran Toby from the Midlands in the UK. He's got a series of questions, but his first one, perhaps if we can take now, is there's some that say, why believe in a non-entity? So, atheists sort of put it that God doesn't exist, and yet you have this great belief in it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are many things that scientists believe in that don't really exist today. And they believe in them mainly to be able to explain away the difficulties that they have to face to be able to show that how life actually appeared, how the universe actually appeared. So they have this lovely, fluffy idea which is called the multiverse, that if there's an infinite number of universes, then mathematically there would be enough universes there, as they're infinite, for one of them to be like our universe. Otherwise, the mathematics behind the statistics of anything happening in the world as we know it today are so mind-boggling that they're absolutely impossible to take place, mathematically speaking. But nobody knows anything of the multiverse. It's just a concept that doesn't really exist, but they talk about it as if it's something which is actually there. There are so many other things like black holes, for example, which are an inference from mathematical calculations, But nobody's actually gone to a black hole to actually film one or see one or anything like that.
Apart from in Hollywood, I think they've done
Yes,
that a
of
few
course,
times.
we might find them in Hollywood, but we know nothing of them. There is also dark matter. There was also this. And we don't know anything about dark matter except what mathematically has to be occurring now. But nobody knows anything about what dark matter is, and yet they believe that it must be there because it has to fill in the gaps in these calculations which are coming up. So there are many things in science which are taken on mere belief or what believers like to call faith, because they like to turn the tables on the science and say, well, you say you're condemning us for faith, for our faith, but you base a lot of things on faith alone, with nothing to substantiate it, you see. So it's a bit fresh coming from people of a scientific background to say that all is nice and hunky-dory in science. Why go to religion where you have to believe in things that, that are non-entities? But the fact of the matter is, God is not a non-entity. He is an entity of a totally different nature, but he does reveal himself and proves his existence by giving knowledge to human beings which is well beyond their ken. And so therefore we know that he has to be there for this to be occurring. But what is he? That is another question in itself.
Just before we move on from this, I mean, the kind of logical conversation you sometimes have and our questioner puts it in the context of both logic and the Holy Quran, but here was the Holy Quran revealed almost 1400 odd years ago to a man who was illiterate, who didn't have a formal education. Yet what's profound about the Holy Quran in itself is what was said there, which even if one casts one's eye back just to this current century, there's so much which has happened which was predicted then.
The Holy Quran is a remarkable book, as you rightly say, and it was revealed again to a man who was not literate. He could not read, he could not write. So one has to question is, where would he get this information from? And what was the information that is contained in the Holy Quran? It is about things that have happened in the past, things that were happening at that time, and about prophecies that would happen and continue to happen 1400 years after that book was revealed. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that you have to remember is that that book has remained unchanged. That again is proof that there is something that has overall protection of that message that was contained in the Holy Quran. And we would say to anyone in this day and age, a challenge: find someone who is illiterate, who cannot read, who cannot write, and ask them to compile a book of this size, which not only contains things about past, about present, but about future, which continue to be fulfilled. I mean, that is just not possible. So we have to accept the fact that the Holy Quran is a miracle, and a miracle that non-believers cannot explain. No matter what they do, they cannot explain that. There are many facets of it that you can take out. The Holy Quran has been memorized by perhaps millions of people over the centuries. Give us an example of any other book which has been memorized by a handful of people of the size of the Holy Quran. That again is proof that there is some special quality in this. And the proofs and what we have seen in our own lifetime about how transport has progressed, the mode of transport. The Holy Quran 1400 years ago, when camel was the mode of transport at that time, that the camel would not be used in future for transport. Who could have predicted that at that time? And the types of modes of transport, of how they would be powered, fuels that would be used for powering them 1400 years ago, and we in our own lives daily fill up our petrols into our cars without even thinking about it. And this was predicted by the Holy Quran as to how energy would be sourced and how it would be used. Then we have the coming together of seas. You know, there are oceans that are in the earth which are separated by land. And who could have thought that these oceans would one day become connected? But 1400 years ago, the Holy Quran says that there's a body of water that is separated by land, and one day that they will meet. And the Suez and the Panama canals again are examples of these. There are so many prophecies in the Holy Quran which have been fulfilled, continue to be fulfilled, and again give the secrets of how life began. These again are contained in the Holy Quran, about the expanding universe, about the black hole. Where did life come from? You know, it's a remarkable book, and it has to be given to us by a being, by an entity about whose powers we are not fully able to comprehend, and science cannot explain these. And even in this respect, science cannot explain how a person who was illiterate could actually compile such a book about prophecies. So there we have it. We do not believe in a non-entity, and this is the proof that that is an entity which has always been there.
Indeed, and the entity is God Almighty. Jahangir Sahib, when you were talking about logic, I've always found that, you know, when you're talking to an atheist, ultimately when they do go back to the Big Bang and say that was what created everything, then one of the things I said, well, conceptually speaking, the entity then you believe that I may call God Almighty the Almighty Creator. For you, you're associating the term Big Bang with it, and for you, that is the creator. And everything around you ultimately has a creator. So why defy something which every other facet of your life demonstrates that everything has a creator, everything has a beginning and an end.
Exactly,
But
yes.
I think sometimes lost on some of our friends there. Jazakumullah, gentlemen, for that.